If someone had told me I'd fall for a woman who never believed in love, yet would end up protecting me and obsessing over me, I would have called them delusional. The invitation had been a low, persistent thrum of annoyance in Sloane's week. A group dinner, a social gathering, two concepts she ranked somewhere between a root canal and being stuck in an elevator with a motivational speaker on the hierarchy of personal hells. Her friends, a well-meaning but relentless bunch, had employed a multi-pronged attack. Guilt, we never see you anymore. Flattery, it won't be fun without you. And finally, outright ambush, showing up at her apartment with a determined glint in their eyes and her jacket in their hands. It's just dinner, Tara had said, her voice the practiced calm of a hostage negotiator. 2 hours maximum. You can grumble the entire time. We promise we'll even let you pick the wine. Sloane had resisted a fortress of muttered excuses and crossed arms. She cited work, a towering unfinished project. She feigned the creeping onset of a migraine. She outright stated for the 100th time that she found the performative joy of crowded restaurants to be emotionally draining and intellectually void. But tonight her friends were impervious. They herded her out the door into the waiting car and through the bustling rain-slicked streets. With the efficiency of a seasoned extraction team, Sloane sat in the back seat, a storm cloud and a leather jacket, her posture a masterclass in reluctance. She stared out the window at the blur of city lights, composing a mental list of all the things she'd rather be doing. Regrouting her bathroom tile, reading a technical manual, watching paint dry in contemplative silence. The restaurant, the Gilded Fig, was everything she despised. It was loud, a cacophony of clinking silverware and overlapping conversations underscored by a terribly trendy jazz playlist. It was dimly lit in that deliberate way meant to be intimate, but only made it difficult to read the menu. The air was thick with the scent of roasted garlic, expensive perfume, and the faint greasy smell of ambition. Sloane slid into the circular booth with all the enthusiasm of a prisoner approaching the gallows. She offered monosyllabic replies to the cheerful chatter around her, her attention fixed on dissecting the menu's absurdly pretentious descriptions. Free-range chicken caressed by a rosemary-infused just she suppressed a snort. It's a chicken, not a Canardo. She was mentally already home, wrapped in the comforting silence of her apartment when the group's dynamic shifted. A new arrival was announced. She's here, someone chirped. Sloane didn't look up. Another person to make meaningless small talk with. Another smile to vaguely acknowledge. Guys, this is Ava. Ava, this is everyone. Driven by a base level of politeness. Or perhaps just to identify the source of the new bubbly voice that cut through the den. Sloane finally reluctantly glanced up, and the world stopped. Time didn't just slow, it fractured. The restaurant's noise faded into a distant, meaningless hum. The clatter of plates, the laughter, the music, it all dissolved into a silent, slow-motion film where the only thing in focus was her, Ava. She was a splash of vibrant color in the muted room. Sun-kissed blonde hair that fell in soft waves around a face studded with a few charming freckles. But it was her smile. It was the kind of smile that seemed to generate its own light source. Wide and genuine and utterly unself-conscious, reaching all the way to her eyes, which were the color of warm honey. Sloane felt the air leave her lungs in a sudden, quiet whoosh. Her heart, usually a steady, pragmatic drum, executed a frantic, stumbling cadence against her ribs. A peculiar warmth flooded her veins, followed immediately by a wave of lightheadedness so intense the room actually tilted. This wasn't a mere acknowledgement of an attractive person. This was a cataclysm. It was a physical, visceral reaction that bypassed every one of her carefully constructed defenses. Her aloof detachment evaporated like mist in a sudden sunrise. Her grumbling internal monologue ceased entirely, replaced by a deafening white-hot static. As her friends made introductions around the table, Sloane's name was uttered. Those honey-colored eyes, Ava's eyes, turned to her. The full force of that brilliant smile was directed at Sloane, and it was like staring directly into the sun. Blinding, overwhelming, necessary. Sloane, the stoic, the gruff, the unshakable, literally stumbled. As she moved to shift in her seat, her knees turned to useless liquid, failed to support her. She swayed, her hand shooting out to grip the tablecloth, rattling the glasses. A faint, entirely uncharacteristic flush heated her cheeks. "Whoa, easy there, Sloane." A friend laughed, mistaking it for clumsiness. But Sloane didn't hear them. She was utterly lost, drowning in the gaze of the bubbly blonde. She managed a stiff, almost imperceptible nod, her throat too tight to form words. Every ounce of her being, every hardened, cynical cell, was screaming one single terrifying, exhilarating thought. Oh, her friends, now completely stunned into silence, watched the impossible unfold. They watched the Ice Queen Thor in real time. They saw the cold, detached look in Sloane's dark eyes soften, then ignite with a raw, undisguised intensity they had never seen before. It was more than shock. It was a fundamental rewriting of Sloane's very code, and Ava, under the weight of that intense, smoldering gaze, felt a corresponding jolt. The easy smile on her lips faltered for a second, replaced by a furious, beautiful blush that spread from her cheeks down to her neck. She looked down, then back up through her lashes, a shy, flustered motion that sent another seismic shock through Sloane's system. The spark didn't just fly. It erupted, a full-blown wildfire between them in the space of a single breathless glance. And for the first time in her life, Sloane, who had been dragged against her will, found herself desperately, fervently glad that she had come. The meal became a surreal experience, a play in which Sloane and Ava were the only actors who knew their lines, while the rest of the world faded into a blurry, inconsequential audience. Sloane, usually a passive and mildly irritated spectator at such events, found herself thrust into a leading role she never auditioned for. Her every instinct hyper-focused on the woman across the table. The act of ordering food was a Herculean task. When the waiter arrived, Sloane, who typically knew her order before even sitting down, fumbled with the menu. The word swam before her eyes. Confit, reduction, emulsion, all meaningless jargon. She could only see the faint glow of Ava's skin under the low light. The way she bit her lip in concentration as she scanned the options. "I'll have the salmon," Sloane finally managed, her voice rougher than usual. It was the first thing her eyes landed on. She didn't care if it was salmon or shoe leather. The table's conversation ebbed and flowed around them. Tara recounted a disastrous date. Ethan explained a complex work project. Laughter erupted over shared memory. Sloane's friends, initially shocked by her transformation, slowly relaxed into the evening, attributing her quiet, intense demeanor to her usual self. They didn't see the earthquake happening beneath the surface. For Sloane, their chatter was a distant radio signal from another planet. Her entire world had shrunk to the space between her and Ava. Every time Ava laughed at a friend's joke, the sound was a physical thing to Sloane, a warm vibration that traveled across the table and settled directly in her chest. She watched the elegant line of Ava's throat as she took a sip of wine. The way her hands, adorned with a few simple silver rings, gestured animatedly as she spoke. And Ava, for her part, was equally captivated. She tried to engage with the group, to be the sociable, present friend she always was. But her gaze kept being pulled back, magnetized to the dark-haired woman who watched her with an intensity that should have been unsettling, but was instead thrilling. Sloane wasn't just looking at her. She was seeing her, absorbing her in a way Ava had never experienced. Their eyes would meet, hold for a breathless second too long, and then skitter away, only to find each other again moments later. It was an unspoken conversation, a dizzying dance of question and answer. "Is this real?" Ava's look seemed to ask, wide-eyed and slightly stunned. "It's the most real thing that's ever happened to me," answered Sloane's steady, dark stare. Then came the contact. The room felt suddenly smaller, the hum of voices a blur behind a pane of glass, thin but absolute. "Sloane," trying to shift her posture and coax some feeling back into legs gone numb since Ava arrived. Moved her foot. At that very instant, Ava, folding her legs beneath the table, shifted hers. It wasn't a graze. It was an impact. Sloane's leather-clad ankle met the soft, bare skin of Ava's calf. The effect was immediate and volcanic. A surge of pure, uncut electricity shot up Sloane's leg, straight to her center, stealing the breath from her lungs. Her head lifted, her eyes catching Ava's across the table. Ava's lips parted in a soft, wordless gasp. The conversation around them carried on, unaware of the tectonic shift unfolding under the polished oak. Neither of them pulled a leg away. Breath returned in short fragments, neither trusted, neither named. That point of contact became the heart of the universe. Sloane felt the astonishing softness of Ava's skin, the faint heat flowing from it. She was hyper-aware of the coarse texture of her own jeans against that smoothness, a contrast unbearably intimate. Her heart was a wild, hammering drum behind her ribs, and she was sure the entire table could hear it. Time stretched. The touch held, a secret shared in the dim. It was a recognition, a promise, a question all at once. Sloane's usual armor, her walls of gruffness and skepticism, didn't just falter. They vaporized in the heat of that simple touch. Ethan shattered the spell, leaning forward to snag the wine bottle and top off glasses. The movement forced them to break contact. Sloane slowly, reluctantly drew her leg back. The place where their skin had met tingling as if seared. A deep sense of loss washed over her, followed by a fierce urge to reestablish the connection, to prove that moment hadn't been an accident. The chatter had shifted to dating and the pitfalls of modern romance. And he actually used the "my dog ate my phone" excuse, Tara was saying, drawing groans and laughter. Ava smiled, a little flushed, and shook her head. I don't know. I think it's sweet when someone is just openly, unabashedly into you. No games. The words left Sloane's mouth before her mind could censor them. Forged in the furnace of overwhelm and aimed directly at Ava. Her voice was a low, gravelly rumble that cut through the lighter tones around them. Well, that shouldn't be a problem for you. The table went silent. Every eye turned to Sloane. Tara's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Ethan blinked. Sloane, who offered compliments with the frequency of a solar eclipse, had just given one. It arrived with the tone of a factual observation, gruff and almost accusing, but it hovered there, undeniable, truly. Her friends laughed, a wave of baffled, startled amusement. They were used to Sloane's dry, often sarcastic remarks. They mistook it for her particular brand of humor. But Ava didn't laugh. She heard the layers under the gravel. She heard the roar, unvarnished sincerity. She heard the awe. Her heart didn't merely skip a beat. It executed a complete, dizzying somersault. Color returned to her cheeks, deeper now, and she lowered her gaze to her plate, a slow, utterly captivated smile touching her lips. Sloane, seeing that smile, a smile she had caused, felt a surge of something terrifying and powerful. It wasn't just attraction. It was the first faint tremor of a foundation she had spent a lifetime building, beginning to crack and shift, making way for something entirely new. The dinner concluded in a haze for both of them. The goodbyes were a blur of jackets being retrieved, of laughter, and promises to do it again soon that Sloane barely registered. She moved on autopilot, her body performing the necessary social rituals while her mind remained trapped in the intimate universe of the dinner table, replaying the brush of skin and the weight of her own uncharacteristic words. The night air was a shock, crisp and cool after the warm wine-scented atmosphere of the restaurant. A light misting rain had begun to fall, catching the light of the street lamps and neon signs, painting the world in streaks of liquid gold and silver. It should have been miserable. To Sloane, it felt electric, charged with the same energy that was humming under her own skin. The group lingered on the sidewalk, the conversation continuing its easy flow. Sloane stood slightly apart, her hands shoved deep into the pockets of her leather jacket, her gaze irresistibly drawn to Ava, who was laughing at something Ethan had said. The sound was melodic, and Sloane found herself cataloging the exact way Ava's nose scrunched when she laughed, the way she tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. They began to move, a loose cluster heading towards the crosswalk. The restaurant steps were old, worn smooth by decades of foot traffic, and the light rain had made the stone treacherously slick. It happened in a heart-stopping instant. Ava, turning to say one last thing to Tara, missed her footing on the top step. Her ankle turned. Her balance vanished. A small, startled gasp escaped her lips, a sound that lanced through the night air and straight into Sloane's heart. Time didn't slow. It exploded. Sloane's body reacted before her mind could even form the thoughtful. It was pure unthinking instinct. She lunged forward, her movements fluid and startlingly fast. One hand shot out, not to grab an arm, but to splay firmly against the small of Ava's back. The other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her backward and upward, arresting her fall with a firm, sure strength. And then Ava was against her. The world narrowed to a single, breathtaking point of contact. Sloane caught her full weight, pulling her flush against her body. Ava's back was against Sloane's chest. Her head was tucked just beneath Sloane's chin. Sloane could feel the frantic bird-like flutter of Ava's heartbeat against her own, a wild rhythm that perfectly matched the hammering in her chest. The scent of Ava's shampoo, something like coconut and vanilla, mingled with the night air and the faint, clean scent of rain on her jacket, creating an intoxicating perfume that was uniquely her. For a suspended moment, they were frozen. Sloane's arms were a solid, unyielding band around Ava, holding her securely. Her face was buried in the softness of Ava's hair, her own breath coming in short, ragged gusts that stirred the golden strands. She could feel every curve of Ava's body mold against her own, a perfect shocking fit. Slowly, ever so slowly, Sloane loosened her grip just enough to turn Ava round in the circle of her arms, their bodies sliding against each other in a way that sent another violent shiver through them both. Now they were face to face. Ava's hands had come up instinctively during the fall, and they now rested against Sloane's chest. Her fingers curled into the damp leather of her jacket. Her eyes were wide, pupils blown black with shock, and something else, something far more potent. Her lips were parted, her breath coming in quick, shallow puffs that ghosted against Sloane's mouth. The space between them was measured in millimeters, charged with a tension so thick it was almost audible. The sounds of the city, the distant honk of a taxi, the murmur of their friends who had stopped to watch, faded into a dull roar. The only thing that existed was the mingling of their breath, the frantic beating of their hearts, and the searing heat where their bodies connected. Sloane's gaze was locked on Ava's, dark and intense, a silent question burning in their depths. Her hand, the one that had been at Ava's waist, hadn't moved. Her thumb, seemingly of its own volition, stroked a slow, absent-minded arc against the soft wool of Ava's sweater. It was a gesture of possession, of comfort, of pure, unadulterated need. Ava felt the touch like a brand. Her skin tingled beneath the layers of fabric. She could feel the solid strength of Sloane's body, the leashed power in the arms that held her. She was trembling, but not from the fall. She was shaking from the nearness, from the raw, unmasked intensity in Sloane's gaze. This was no longer a mere spark. It was a conflagration, and she stood squarely in the fire. Sloane's voice, when it finally arrived, was a low, gravelly rasp, a scraped roar born of the effort of bottling the storm inside her. It was supposed to be gruff, a brush-off of the moment, but it emerged as something else entirely. A hushed, intimate murmur meant only for Ava's ears. "You're fine." The words were a stark understatement. She was anything but fine. She was unmoored, upended, utterly and completely undone. Yet her hand, the one at Ava's waist, lingered. It held fast, refusing to sever the connection, quietly contradicting her words. It said, "I've got you. I won't let you fall." Ava was the one who finally shattered the spell, her voice a breathless, trembling thing. "Yeah, thank you. Clumsy me. She made a weak attempt to straighten, and Sloane's arms slowly, reluctantly let go. The cool night air rushed in to fill the space where their bodies had met. Feeling like a profound absence, their friends, after assuring themselves that Ava was okay, began to drift on, chuckling about the near miss. But Sloane and Ava stayed planted for another second, simply staring at each other, the air between them still alive with static. As Ava turned to follow the group, her legs felt as if they were made of jelly. A single, terrifying, exhilarating thought crystallized in her mind with perfect clarity. I'm not in danger of slipping on the steps. I'm in real danger of slipping for her. And Sloane, watching her walk away, her hands still tingling with the memory of Ava's waist, knew with a certainty that rattled her to her core that the ground had just given way beneath her too. And for the first time, she wasn't trying to clutch for something to hold. She was simply replaying the fall. The morning after the dinner played out as a study in starkly, sharply different realities. For Ava, the world looked brighter, crisper, as if someone had raised the saturation. She moved through her morning ritual with a restless, buzzing energy, her mind replaying the previous night on a continuous, dizzying loop. The ferocious look across the table, the electric press of legs, and most vividly, the sense of being caught, held, and utterly consumed in Sloane's arms on the rain-slick stairs. A permanent, secret smile toyed with her lips. She felt as if she were floating, buoyed by a thrilling and unfamiliar hope. Yet a single nagging thought began to prick the bubble of her euphoria. Sloane's intensity was intoxicating, but it was also solitary. There was a gravity to her, a solitude that felt deeply etched in. The way her friends had reacted to that simple compliment hinted at a history, a pattern of behavior that was being upended. Ava needed to understand. The hope in her chest was too delicate to build on a mystery. She sent a text to Tara, her heart thudding a little harder than a simple inquiry should warrant. Ava, hey, last night was so fun. Everyone was lovely. Quick question. The brunette, Sloane. She's intriguing. Is she always so intense? The three bouncings appeared immediately, then vanished, then appeared again. Tara was choosing her words. Tara. Lol. Yeah, that's Sloane. She's our beloved grump. We were honestly surprised. She came. Ava. Really? Why? A longer pause this time. Ava's phone finally buzzed with a call. Tara's voice was warm, but laced with a note of caution. Look, Ava, I don't want to weird you out or anything. We all adore Sloane. She's the most loyal person you'll ever meet. But she's built a fortress around herself. She doesn't do social stuff. She really doesn't do dating. Ava's floating feeling began to sink. Never. I've known her since college, Tara said, her tone softening. And in all that time, I have never ever seen her with anyone. Not a date, not a hookup, nothing. She's got this thing. She says romance is a chemical illusion, and love is a temporary psychosis. Tara laughed, but it was fond, not mocking. She thinks it's all a grand waste of time. We've given up trying to set her up. She's happily married to her cynicism. The words landed like stones in the pit of Ava's stomach. The brilliant, hopeful image of Sloane, the one who had held her with such possessive strength, fractured. It was replaced by a colder, lawnier picture. A woman who had deliberately walled herself off from the very thing Ava felt sparking between them. The intensity wasn't a prelude. It was just her, and it was directed at nothing. A profound sadness washed over Ava, not for herself, but for Sloane. To live like that, to deliberately avoid that kind of connection. It seemed so tragically lonely. The intrigue, however, didn't diminish. It magnified. It transformed from a simple crush into a compelling mystery. Why? What had happened to make someone so vibrant build such impenetrable walls? And what did it mean that last night for a moment those walls had seemed to tremble? The sadness and the intrigue weared within her all day, a quiet tumult beneath her cheerful exterior. By late afternoon, a reckless, brave impulse took hold. It was a dangerous question, one that could shatter the fragile possibility before it even began. But she had to know. She had to hear it from her. Her fingers trembled as she pulled up Sloane's number, painstakingly acquired from a group chat earlier that day. She typed the message, deleted it, rephrased it, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was too forward, too personal, too soon. She took a deep breath and pressed send before she could lose her nerve. Ava. Hey, it's Ava from last night. This might be a weird question, but do you really not believe in love? Across the city, Sloane's day had been the opposite of bright. It had been a disorienting internal earthquake. She'd been useless at work, staring blankly at her computer screen, her mind replaying the sensation of Ava in her arms on a continuous, tortuous loop. The feel of her sweater under her hand, the scent of her hair, the dizzying proximity of her lips. She felt raw, exposed, as if her emotional skin had been sandpapered off. The comfortable, familiar armor of her cynicism felt ill-fitting, like she'd outgrown it overnight. She was irritated, restless, and utterly consumed. Her phone, face down on her desk, buzzed with a text. She ignored it. It buzzed again, probably Tara checking in. She flipped it over with a sigh and froze. The name on the screen wasn't Tara. It was Ava. The air left her lungs in a rush. Her heart, which had been beating a slow, annoyed rhythm, suddenly kicked into a frantic, pounding gallop. She stared at the words, reading them over and over. Each time, the question hitting her with the force of a physical blow. Do you really not believe in love? It was the foundational stone of her entire adult identity, the creed she lived by. The answer was a simple resounding yes. It was a fact as incontrovertible as gravity. She had constructed her life on certainty. Yet now the question came from her, from the woman whose smile had shattered Sloane's cosmos, from the woman whose touch had felt more immediate than anything Sloane had known in years. The old reply rose to her mouth by reflex. No, it's a fantasy, a trap. She could type it. It would be easy. It would finish this, whatever this was. It would redraw lines, safe and familiar. It would shield her. Her thumb hovered over the glass, but the memory of last night flooded back. The blinding brightness of Ava's smile, the warmth of her skin, the way her carefully assembled defenses had not merely cracked but fled like mist in her presence. To give the old answer felt like a lie, a betrayal not of Ava, but of the terrifying, thrilling truth turning her insides to liquid. She typed the old reply. No, I don't. She stared at it. It looked empty, false. She erased it. She started again. It's complicated. Thin. Delete. Minutes slid by. 5. 10. She was frozen, trapped in a quiet war between a lifetime of self-protection and a single, earth-shattering night of possibility. She pictured Ava's hopeful eyes, the courage it must have taken to send such a blunt, unguarded question. She deserved a true answer, not the old one, the new frightening honest one. Drawing a shuddering breath that felt like the first of her life, Sloane typed 3 words. They were the truest words she had ever written. They felt like stepping off a cliff. She hit send before she could stop herself. Sloane, I'm starting to. In her apartment, Ava's phone buzzed on the coffee table. She snatched it up, her breath catching in her throat. She had let hope fade, assuming her message was too much, that she had scared off the enigmatic woman. She read the 3-word reply, and her world, which had felt dim all day, burst into color. A sound escaped her, a half-gasp, half-laugh of pure, undiluted joy. Her grin didn't just divide her face. It felt like it could light the entire city. She hugged the phone to her chest, turning in a small circle, her heart soaring. She had her answer, not a brush-off, but a confession. A door cracked open just for her. She typed back, her fingers flying across the screen, all hesitation gone. Ava, starting to. What changed? The response arrived faster this time. Sloane, I had dinner. And just like that, the exchange began. Text after text, zipping back and forth. They messaged like teenagers, smiles etched on their faces, the outside world forgotten. For Sloane, it was a frightening and exhilarating step into the unknown. For Ava, it was proof that a spark, against all odds, could catch flame. The 24 hours between Sloane's text and their planned meeting in the park were a peculiar mix of torment and giddy anticipation for both of them. The constant buzzing current of messages had formed a new, intimate world living solely on their phones, a world of witty back and forth, shy confessions about favorite books, and the thrilling, unspoken recognition of the current between them. But a text thread was a safe, curated thing. A face-to-face meeting was a plunge into open water, for real. Sloane arrived 15 minutes early, a product of a lifelong habit of punctuality and a fierce need to claim the ground first. She paced the edges of the small, quaint park, Grayson Commons, her hands jammed deep into the pockets of her dark jeans, a black knit beanie pulled low over her brows. She felt like an exposed nerve. Every rustle of leaves, every distant shout from a child on the playground made her flinch. She rehearsed lines in her head, all of which sounded impossibly stupid and stilted. Hey, the weather is weathery. So about that whole almost dropping you thing. She groaned internally when she saw Ava approaching from the far end of the path. Her breath hitched. The woman was a splash of sunshine against the muted greens and grays of the park. She wore a cream-colored sweater that seemed to glow, and her blonde hair was down, catching the afternoon light. She looked happy, hopeful. Sloane's stomach performed a complicated acrobatic routine. She's going to take one look at me, a nervous wreck hiding by an oak tree, and realized she made a terrible mistake. Ava, for her part, had spent the morning trying on half her wardrobe, her own nerves a frantic chorus. She had chosen the sweater for its softness, hoping it made her look approachable, not like she was trying too hard. As she walked, she spotted Sloane, and a wave of relief mixed with fresh anxiety washed over her. Sloane looked incredibly cool and incredibly uncomfortable all at once, a combination Ava found utterly endearing. She looked like a beautiful, brooding statue that had been rudely awakened and told to socialize. Hey, Ava called out, her voice a little too bright, betraying her own nerves. Sloane turned, and the full force of her dark-eyed gaze landed on Ava. It was just as intense as it had been at the restaurant, but now there was a new layer to it, a flicker of something vulnerable, almost shy, beneath the intensity. It made Ava's heart flip. Hey, Sloane replied, her voice, its usual low gravel, but softer around the edges. An awkward silence descended, thick and immediate. They stood a few feet apart, the space between them humming with unspoken words. Sloane stared at a point just over Ava's shoulder. Ava fiddled with the strap of her crossbody bag. So Ava said finally, gesturing vaguely down the path, shall we? Sloane just nodded, falling into step beside her. The first 5 minutes were brutal. Their steps didn't sync. Sloane's strides were long and purposeful. Ava's were shorter, more meandering. They'd both start to speak at the same time, then stop. You go. No, you. Another awkward pause. Sloane inwardly cursed herself. She was blowing it. She was a conversational black hole, sucking all the air and joy out of this walk. Ava, however, refused to let the silence win. She launched into a story about a disastrous baking attempt from the previous week, her hands waving animatedly as she described a kitchen covered in flour and a cake that had emerged from the oven looking profoundly sad. Sloane listened and a miracle happened. She felt herself beginning to relax. The tight coil of anxiety in her chest began to unfurl. Ava's chatter wasn't empty noise. It was a lifeline. It was warm and funny and genuine. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched Sloane's lips. You used salt instead of sugar? Sloane asked, her tone dry. That's a rookie mistake. Ava grinned, thrilled at the engagement. In my defense, the containers look exactly the same. It was an act of sabotage by Big Kitchenware. Sloane actually chuckled. It was a low, rusty sound, as if it wasn't used often. But it was real, I'm sure. A grand conspiracy against your baking ambitions. The ice was broken. They fell into a rhythm, their steps naturally sinking as they wandered away from the main path onto a quieter trail that wound around a small reed-fringed pond. The conversation began to flow, easy and surprisingly deep. They talked about the books that had shaped them, Sloane favoring dense philosophical fiction, Ava loving sprawling character-driven epics. They debated music. Sloane's playlists were full of moody post-punk and ambient soundscapes, while Ava's were vibrant with indie pop and soulful singer-songwriters. Sloane found herself talking more than she had in years. She spoke about her work as a graphic designer, about the satisfaction of a clean, functional design. Ava listened with rapt attention, asking insightful questions that made Sloane feel heard, understood, not just tolerated. And Sloane was intoxicated. It wasn't just Ava's beauty. It was her presence. Her warmth was a physical force radiating from her. And Sloane, who had always prided herself on her self-sufficiency, felt herself leaning into it like a flower towards the sun. She was dizzy with it, high on the sound of Ava's laughter and the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dream of opening a small community art studio. Ava, feeling more confident, decided to poke the bear. She nudged Sloane's shoulder with her own. You know, for a supposed grump, you're actually a pretty good conversationalist. Sloane arched an eyebrow, falling easily into the role. Don't spread it around. I have a reputation to keep. Oh, I won't, Ava teased. Your secret stays with me, Grumpy Cat. The absurd nickname should have irritated her. Instead, it sent a shiver through her. It felt intimate. It felt theirs. And I suppose that makes you the overly cheery one who tumbles off things, Sloane shot back, a playful gleam in her eye that Ava had never witnessed before. It was devastating. Hey, I fell once, and it was a very graceful, almost ballet-like stumble, Ava protested, laughing. Of course, my mistake, Sloane said, her deadpan delivery faultless. They had reached the end of the path where a broad, ancient oak stood guard. The sun was beginning its slow drop, casting long, honeyed shadows. They paused, leaning against the wooden rail that looked over the pond. A comfortable quiet settling between them this time, filled only with bird song and the faraway sounds of the city. A breeze lifted the scent of cut grass and damp earth, softening edges neither of them could name. The walk had ended. Neither of them moved to go. Ava turned to say something, to suggest grabbing coffee, to do anything to stretch this perfect afternoon. As she turned, her hand, which had been resting on the rail, brushed against Sloane's. It was the lightest, most accidental touch, just skin touching skin. Yet the effect matched the deliberate contact under the dinner table. A jolt of pure, undiluted current shot up both their arms. Ava's words dissolved in her throat. Sloane's breath hitched. This time, neither withdrew. Their hands remained there side by side on the weathered wood, the pinky of Ava's hand just touching the edge of Sloane's. It was a question, an invitation. Slowly, deliberately, Sloane turned her hand over, palm up. It was the most vulnerable gesture she had ever made. An offering, a surrender. Ava's heart felt ready to beat out of her chest. She didn't hesitate. She slid her hand into Sloane's, weaving their fingers. The connection felt absolute. Sloane's hand was cool, and her grip was sure. Her fingers slotting between Ava's as if made to rest there. Ava's hand was warm and soft. They stood like that, hands joined, not looking at each other, but gazing out at the pond, at ducks gliding silently over the water. No words were necessary. Silence did the speaking, very sure. The air around them hummed with electricity from the simple, profound contact. The gruff stoic and the bubbly believer stood in the gilded afternoon light, holding on as though they'd each found the one thing they never knew they were missing. The spark hadn't merely caught. It had become a steady, comforting flame. The park walk didn't stay a singular moment. It turned into a promise. It lit a ritual so potent it quickly rewired the circuitry of their ordinary days. For Sloane, the change was tectonic. Her once solitary, structured existence work, gym, home, silence was now broken by a thrilling, anxious expectancy. The clock on her office screen was no longer a list of deadlines, but a countdown to 5:30 p.m. Her phone, once a tool, became a cherished talisman, its screen flashing with texts that sent a charge through her system every time. Ava 3:14 p.m. Grumpy Cat status check. How's the design beast today? Sloane 3:15 p.m. Beastly. It refuses to be tamed. Counting the minutes till distraction. Ava 3:16 p.m. Distraction arriving at 5:30 sharp with coffee. You take it black, right? Like your soul. Winking face. Sloane would study the message, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face that made her co-workers glance twice. She lived for those messages. They were bright lifelines thrown across the gray sea of her day. The meetups themselves formed their own world. Some days it was coffee, Sloane nursing a stark black Americano, while Ava indulged in something frothy and sweet with a name that ran a paragraph long. Other days it was a stroll, their routes through the city or along the river becoming familiar, treasured territory. Most often it was simply a bench. Their bench in a quiet corner of a lesser-known park where rustling leaves and the distant city hum served as their only audience. They talked about everything, the big things. Ava's complicated relationship with her family, Sloane's quiet estrangement from hers, the small things, a funny-shaped cloud, a terrible song on the radio, the existential dread of a misplaced keys. Sloane, who had always found small talk to be a special kind of hell, discovered she could talk to Ava for hours about nothing at all and find it utterly captivating. She was addicted to the sound of her laughter, to the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she was making a joke, to the thoughtful pause she took before answering a serious question. The need for each other grew from a pleasant habit into a desperate physical ache. It was a constant hum beneath their conversations, a magnetic pull that made the space between them on that park bench feel like a vast, unbearable chasm. There were two celestial bodies caught in each other's orbit, drifting inevitably closer. Then came the evening that shattered the last of the pretense. The air was cool, the sky a deep periwinkle bleeding into orange at the horizon. They were on their bench, shoulders pressed together for warmth, having long ago discarded any notion of personal space. Ava was scrolling through her phone, recounting a ridiculous series of events from her day at the art gallery where she worked. And then Mrs. Whitmore's little Pomeranian Winston tried to praise a very expensive sculpture. With his leg, Ava said, her voice shaking with suppressed laughter. Sloane snorted a real undignified sound that was becoming more common around Ava. I hope you charged him a commission. I should have. Ava giggled, scrolling to find a picture. Oh, wait. You have to see this. The artist sent a mock-up for the new exhibit, and it is gloriously weird. She shifted, leaning closer to Sloane to show her the screen. The scent of her vanilla, and sunshine, and crisp autumn air wrapped around Sloane, intoxicating. Sloane leaned in, her cheek coming to rest mere millimeters from Ava's. She could feel the faint warmth radiating from Ava's skin. See, Ava said, her voice dropping to a hushed, intimate tone. It's a sculpture made entirely of recycled rubber chickens. It's called Cluculent Silence. Sloane wasn't looking at the phone. She was looking at the profile of Ava's face, at the soft curve of her cheek, the faint dusting of freckles across her nose. The world narrowed to the sliver of space between their skin, and then Sloane moved. It wasn't a thought. It was a compulsion, a need so profound it overrode a lifetime of caution. She closed that infinitesimal distance, her cheek pressed fully against Ava's. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. A sharp shared intake of breath. A tremor ran through both of them, a seismic shock wave from that single point of contact. Sloane's eyes fluttered closed. The world vanished. There was no park, no bench, no rubber chicken art. There was only the impossibly soft warmth of Ava's skin against hers. It was the most intimate sensation she had ever experienced. She could feel the faint, delicate structure of Ava's cheekbone, the whisper-soft hair at her temple. She was drowning in it. Ava froze, her entire world reducing to the point where Sloane's skin met hers. It was an electric current, a live wire straight to her core. The phone, forgotten, slipped slightly in her grasp. She could feel the faint tremor in Sloane's body, a mirror of her own. Sloane's skin was cool and smooth, a startling contrast to the warmth blooming across Ava's own face. The gesture was so vulnerable, so raw, it stole the air from her lungs. For a long, breathless moment, they stayed there, cheeks pressed together, breathing each other's air, their breaths shaky and uneven. The intimacy was so intense it was almost painful. Then slowly, Ava pulled back. Just an inch. Just enough to break the contact. Sloane's heart plummeted. Too much. I moved too fast. But before the panic could fully take root, Ava turned her head. Her eyes dark and wide with wonder, locked with Sloane's. There was no hesitation in them. Only a mirror of the same desperate, awe-struck need with a tenderness that made Sloane's throat ache. Ava raised her hand. She cupped Sloane's face, her thumb stroking a gentle arc along her jawline. For part 2, subscribe to our channel and ring the bell.